The December wind howled through the streets of Manhattan like a wounded animal, carrying with it the promise of the year's worst blizzard. Marcus Wellington pulled his cashmere coat tighter as he stepped out of his black sedan, the warmth of the heated leather seats already a distant memory. At 42, he had built an empire in tech innovation, but tonight, all his billions couldn't shield him from the bitter cold that seemed to seep into his very bones. His driver, James, rolled down the window. "Sir, are you certain you don't want me to wait? The weather's getting worse by the minute." Marcus shook his head, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "I need to walk, James. Clear my head before tomorrow's board meeting. I'll take a cab home." As the sedan disappeared into the swirling snow, Marcus found himself alone on the nearly deserted street. The city that never slept seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the storm to pass. Street lamps cast eerie halos through the falling snow, and the usual symphony of traffic had been reduced to a whisper. He had walked only 3 blocks when he heard it, a small voice, barely audible above the wind. "Sir? Sir, please." Marcus stopped, straining his ears. There it was again, coming from the narrow alley between 2 brownstones. Against his better judgment, he turned toward the sound, his expensive Italian shoes crunching through the accumulating snow. What he saw made his heart stop. Huddled against a dumpster, wrapped in what appeared to be a torn blanket, was a small girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, her dark skin providing stark contrast to the white snow that had begun to gather in her hair. Beside her, even smaller and pressed close for warmth, was a boy who looked to be about 5. "Sir," the girl said again, her voice shaking from cold and fear. "Please, sir. We're so cold. Could you please adopt us?" The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. In all his years of corporate negotiations and million-dollar deals, no one had ever asked him for anything so simple, so profound, and so heartbreaking. He knelt down in the snow, ignoring the cold seeping through his expensive pants. "What are your names?" he asked gently, his voice softer than it had been in years. "I'm Maya," the girl whispered, pulling the boy closer. "This is my little brother, David. We don't have anywhere to go." Marcus looked into Maya's eyes that held far too much wisdom and pain for someone so young, and felt something shift inside his chest. Something he hadn't felt since his own childhood, before success had built walls around his heart. "Come on," Marcus said without hesitation, shrugging off his cashmere coat and wrapping it around both children. "Let's get you somewhere warm." Maya's eyes widened with surprise and wariness. "You're not going to call the police?" "No police," Marcus assured her, lifting David into his arms. The boy was lighter than he expected, too light, and Marcus felt anger surge through him at whatever circumstances had led these children to this alley. "I'm taking you somewhere safe and warm." He hailed a taxi, which was no small feat in the worsening weather. The driver looked skeptical until Marcus flashed a $100 bill. "The Plaza Hotel, and turn up the heat." During the short ride, Marcus learned fragments of their story. Maya spoke in whispers, glancing nervously at the taxi driver. Their mother had died 6 months ago. They had been staying with their aunt, but she had lost her apartment. The foster system had been mentioned, but Maya had grabbed David's hand, and they had run. "We just need someone to love us," Maya said simply, and Marcus felt his throat constrict. At the plaza, the concierge barely raised an eyebrow when Marcus Wellington, one of their most valued guests, walked in with 2 homeless children wrapped in his coat. Money, Marcus had learned long ago, made the impossible merely inconvenient. Within an hour, he had secured a suite, ordered room service, and called his personal physician. Dr. Elizabeth Harper arrived within 30 minutes, her medical bag in hand and questions in her eyes. "Just make sure they're okay," Marcus said quietly as Maya clutched David's hand in the ornate sitting room. "They've been on the streets." Dr. Harper was gentle but thorough. Both children were malnourished and David had the early signs of pneumonia, but nothing that couldn't be treated with proper care, medication, and most importantly, consistent meals and warmth. As Maya and David devoured their first real meal in days, room service hamburgers and hot chocolate, Marcus stepped onto the suite's balcony and called his lawyer. Richard, I need you to research emergency custody procedures in New York State. Emergency custody? Marcus, what's going on? Marcus watched through the glass as Maya helped David with his hot chocolate, her small hands steady despite everything they had endured. I think I'm about to become a father. The snow continued to fall outside, but inside the warm suite, two children slept peacefully for the first time in months, while a billionaire sat in a chair nearby, keeping watch and wondering how his entire life had changed in the span of a single winter evening. Marcus woke with a start, his neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. Sunlight streamed through the heavy curtains of the plaza suite, and for a moment, he wondered if the events of the previous night had been an elaborate dream. Then he heard soft voices from the bedroom. Maya, are you sure he won't send us away? David's voice was small and uncertain. I don't know, Davy, but he gave us his coat, and he stayed with us all night. That has to mean something, right? Marcus stood quietly, his heart aching at the vulnerability in their voices. He knocked gently on the bedroom door. Good morning. How did you sleep? Maya appeared in the doorway, still wearing the oversized plaza bathrobe that the hotel had provided. Her hair had been washed and braided. She must have done it herself. And in the morning light, Marcus could see that she had her mother's eyes, warm and intelligent. We slept good, sir, she said politely. Thank you for the warm bed. My name is Marcus, he said, kneeling to her level. You don't have to call me sir. David peeked out from behind his sister, his fever from the night before already improving thanks to Dr. Harper's antibiotics. Marcus is a nice name, he said shyly. Over breakfast, real breakfast with fresh fruit, pancakes, and orange juice, Marcus began to understand the magnitude of what he was considering. These weren't stray puppies he could simply take home. They were human beings with complex needs, trauma, and a history he was only beginning to understand. His phone rang constantly. His assistant, worried about his absence from morning meetings. His board members, concerned about the weather delay. The CEO of a company he was acquiring, anxious about their afternoon negotiation. Marcus answered none of them. Instead, he listened as Maya told him about their mother, Sarah Johnson, a nurse who had worked double shifts to keep them fed and housed. She had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving behind two children and a mountain of medical debt. Their aunt, Denise, had tried to help, but losing her job at the start of the pandemic had made it impossible. We lived in our car for a while, Maya explained matter-of-factly, cutting David's pancakes for him. But then it got repossessed. Aunt Denise said the foster people were coming, but they wanted to split us up. David's younger, so he'd probably get adopted easier. But I don't want to be adopted without Maya, David piped up, syrup on his chin. She takes care of me, and I always will, Maya said fiercely, reaching across to wipe his face. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Here was an 8-year-old girl who had been forced to become a mother, a protector, a provider. She had kept herself and her brother alive through circumstances that would have broken most adults. And she had done it with a grace and determination that humbled him. Maya, he said carefully, what if I told you that you'd never have to take care of David alone again? That you could just be his big sister, and someone else would make sure you both had everything you needed? She looked at him with those two wise eyes. You mean it? You'd really adopt us? Both of us. If that's what you want, Marcus said, and meant it more than he had ever meant anything in his life. The offices of Morrison, Clark and Associates occupied 3 floors of a midtown Manhattan skyscraper, but Marcus had never been more grateful for Richard Morrison's expertise than he was that morning. His lawyer, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s who had handled everything from hostile takeovers to prenuptial agreements, looked genuinely bewildered as he spread documents across his mahogany desk. Marcus, I have to be honest with you, Richard said, adjusting his glasses. What you're proposing is unprecedented. Emergency custody, possible adoption, 2 children with no clear documentation of their current legal status. This isn't like acquiring a company. There are protocols, investigations, home studies. Maya and David sat quietly in the leather chairs beside Marcus's desk, David's small legs swinging as he clutched a new stuffed elephant Marcus had bought him that morning. Maya watched the adults speak with the same intense attention. She seemed to give everything. How long? Marcus asked simply. Best case scenario? 6 months to a year for adoption proceedings, assuming everything goes smoothly. But first, we need to establish temporary custody, and that requires Child Protective Services involvement. No, Maya said sharply, causing all the adults to turn toward her. I'm sorry, sir, Marcus, but we can't go with CPS. They'll separate us. David's little and cute. He'll get a family. But I'm older and I. She trailed off, looking down at her hands. Marcus leaned forward. And you what, Maya? I get scared sometimes, she whispered. When I remember Mama dying. And I get angry when people try to split us up. Social workers say that makes me a challenging placement. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke Marcus's heart. This little girl had been labeled difficult because she wanted to protect her brother. Because she grieved for her mother. Because she was human. Richard, Marcus said quietly, what if we approach this differently? What about emergency guardianship while we work on the adoption? Richard frowned, flipping through legal documents. That would require proving immediate danger to the children's welfare and establishing that you're the most suitable temporary
guardian.
Given your lack of experience with children, your work schedule, your single status. Then we make me suitable, Marcus interrupted. What do I need? A bigger apartment? Childcare? Character references? Whatever it takes. Over the next 3 hours, they outlined a strategy. Marcus would need to hire a live-in nanny or au pair. He would need to relocate to a family-friendly neighborhood, preferably with good schools nearby. He would need character references from colleagues, friends, and community members. Most importantly, he would need to demonstrate that he understood the commitment he was making. This isn't a business deal, Marcus, Richard warned as they prepared to leave. You can't return them if it doesn't work out. These are children who have already been abandoned and traumatized. If you take this on, you have to see it through. Marcus looked at Maya, who was helping David button his new coat, another purchase from that morning's impromptu shopping trip. Maya, he called softly. She turned, and he saw in her eyes the same question he had been asking himself all day. Could he really do this? Could a man who had spent the last 20 years building walls around his heart learn to be what these children needed? Are you having second thoughts? She asked, with that unsettling ability children have to cut straight to the heart of things. No, Marcus said, surprised to find that it was true. I'm just trying to figure out how to be the best guardian I can be for you and David. Maya studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Mama used to say that love isn't something you know how to do. It's something you learn by doing it. As they left the law office, Marcus realized that an 8-year-old girl was about to teach him the most important lesson of his life. Marcus had always believed that money could solve most problems, but as he stood in his penthouse apartment 3 days later, he realized that some challenges required more than financial resources. His pristine, minimalist space, all glass, steel, and expensive art, looked like a museum rather than a home where children could thrive. It's very clean, Maya observed politely, holding David's hand as they stood in the vast living room. David pressed closer to his sister. Are we allowed to touch things? The question hit Marcus harder than any boardroom criticism ever had. These children had learned to make themselves small, to take up as little space as possible. His beautiful apartment suddenly felt cold and unwelcoming. You can touch whatever you want, he said quickly. This is your home now, too. That afternoon, he called Elena Vasquez, the highly recommended child psychologist Dr. Harper had suggested. Elena was a warm woman in her 40s who specialized in trauma-informed care for children who had experienced loss and displacement. Mr. Wellington, she said as they sat in his sterile living room while Maya and David explored their temporary bedrooms, creating a sense of safety and belonging isn't about expensive toys or perfect conditions. It's about consistency, patience, and letting them help shape their environment. Over the following week, Marcus learned more about children than he had ever imagined possible. He discovered that David had nightmares and often crawled into Maya's bed for comfort. Maya, meanwhile, woke early every morning and checked the refrigerator, not because she was hungry but because she needed to know there would be food tomorrow. It's a survival behavior, Elena explained during one of their daily sessions. She's been responsible for their survival for months. Learning to trust that someone else will provide for them takes time. Marcus threw himself into the task of creating a real home with the same intensity he had once applied to business ventures. But instead of market research and profit projections, he studied child development books and interviewed potential nannies. He found Isabella Rodriguez, a former elementary school teacher in her 30s who had left teaching to care for her aging mother. She was patient, bilingual, and most importantly, she made Maya laugh, something Marcus had rarely seen in the week since they had been together. The children need routine, Isabella advised as they planned the transition to a larger apartment Marcus had purchased on the Upper West Side. Consistent meal times, bedtime stories, rules they can count on. And Mr. Wellington, Marcus, they need to see you as a person, not just a provider. The new apartment was a revelation. Instead of cold glass and steel, there were warm hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and large windows that let in natural light. Maya's room was painted soft lavender, her choice, while David had requested dinosaur blue. They each had their own space, but there were also common areas designed for a family. "Can we really put our pictures on the walls?" Maya asked, holding a photo of their mother that she had carried in her pocket through everything. "It's not home without them," Marcus replied, and watched as both children began, tentatively, to believe they might actually be safe. The first night in the new apartment, as Marcus tucked David into his dinosaur-themed bed, the little boy looked up at him with serious eyes. "Marcus," he whispered. "Yes, buddy? Are you going to be our daddy now?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "If that's what you want, David. But even if I'm your daddy, Maya will still be your big sister, and your mama will always be your mama. No one can take that away." David nodded solemnly, then smiled. "I think Mama would like you. You gave us warm beds, and you make Maya smile." That night, for the first time since childhood, Marcus fell asleep feeling like he was exactly where he belonged. 6 weeks into their new life together, Marcus thought he was beginning to understand the rhythm of being a guardian. Morning routines with breakfast and backpack checks, afternoon homework sessions with Isabella, evening dinners where David told elaborate stories about his day and Maya quietly observed everything with her thoughtful eyes. But then came the call that reminded him how fragile their newfound stability really was. "Mr. Wellington? This is Janet Crawford from the New York City Administration for Children's Services. We need to discuss the Johnson children." Marcus stepped out of David's room, where he had been reading bedtime stories, and closed the door behind him. "What can I do for you, Ms. Crawford? We've been made aware that you've taken in 2 minors without going through proper channels. While I understand your intentions were good, there are procedures that must be followed. We need to schedule a home visit." The home visit was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Marcus spent the weekend in a state of barely controlled anxiety, while Maya retreated into herself, speaking only in whispers and hovering close to David as if protecting him from an unseen threat. "They're going to take us away, aren't they?" she asked Marcus on Monday night as he helped her with a math homework problem. "I won't let that happen," Marcus said firmly. "We're a family now." Maya looked up from her worksheet. "You promise?" It was such a simple question, but Marcus understood the weight of it. This little girl had heard promises before, from relatives, from social workers, from adults who had ultimately let her down. His word was all he had to offer, but it was also everything. "I promise, Maya." Janet Crawford arrived precisely at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, accompanied by a younger social worker named Tom Chin. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. "Mr. Wellington," she said, barely glancing at the children's artwork on the refrigerator or the family photos Marcus had helped them arrange on the mantelpiece. "I need to understand how 2 homeless children ended up in the care of a man with no prior experience with child services." Marcus explained the circumstances of that snowy night, his decision to provide emergency care, and his ongoing legal efforts to formalize custody. Isabella provided documentation of the children's daily routines, medical care, and educational needs. Dr. Harper had written a comprehensive report on their physical and emotional progress. But it was Maya who ultimately made the difference. "Ms. Crawford, she said, stepping forward with the poise of someone much older. "Can I ask you something?" The social worker looked surprised but nodded. "Do you have kids?" "I do. A daughter about your age." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Then you know that kids need someone who will keep them safe and love them even when they're scared or sad or angry. Marcus does that for us. He learned how to braid my hair when I was missing Mama. He sits with David when he has nightmares. He doesn't just give us food and clothes, he gives us hugs." She paused, looking directly at Janet Crawford. "I know you have to do your job, but please don't take us away from someone who loves us just because he didn't fill out the right papers first. Sometimes love happens before paperwork does." The silence in the room was deafening. Then David, who had been quietly playing with blocks in the corner, walked over and took Marcus's hand. "This is my family," he said simply. "Maya and Marcus and Isabella. We all take care of each other." Janet Crawford cleared her throat and made several notes in her file. She interviewed each of them separately, inspected bedrooms and play areas, and reviewed Isabella's credentials and the children's school enrollment. Finally, she sat down across from Marcus in the living room while Maya and David colored at the kitchen table. "Mr. Wellington, what you've done is highly irregular. These children should have been placed in temporary foster care while proper procedures were followed." Marcus felt his heart sink, but Janet wasn't finished. "However," she continued, "it's clear that Maya and David are thriving in your care. Their health has improved, they're enrolled in excellent schools, and they show clear attachment to you and Ms. Rodriguez. While I can't approve of how this arrangement began, I can't argue with the results." She handed him a folder of documents. "These are the forms for emergency guardianship. Fill them out, get them notarized, and file them with family court by Friday. I'll be recommending temporary custody be granted pending formal adoption proceedings." After she left, Maya threw her arms around Marcus's waist. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "I'll always keep my promises to you," Marcus replied, finally understanding what it meant to have something worth more than money, worth more than anything he had ever built or achieved. He had a family. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the hallway of PS 163, waiting for his first parent-teacher conference. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who had commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals was nervous about meeting a 4th-grade teacher. "Mr. Wellington?" A young woman with curly red hair and paint-stained fingers extended her hand. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, Maya's teacher. Thank you so much for coming." They settled into tiny plastic chairs in Maya's classroom, surrounded by colorful artwork and reading corners that felt worlds away from Marcus's corporate environment. Maya's desk was neat and organized, with a small photo of her mother tucked into the corner. "Maya is an exceptional student," Ms. Walsh began, "but I wanted to discuss some concerns. She's academically advanced, probably ready for 5th-grade work in reading and math, but she struggles with social connections." Marcus nodded. He had noticed Maya's tendency to isolate herself at the playground, to watch other children play rather than joining in. "She's very protective of David," Ms. Walsh continued. "When he started kindergarten, she would sneak out of class to check on him. She's also hypervigilant about his lunch. She packs extra sandwiches for him every day, even though I've assured her that the school provides meals. She's been responsible for his survival for a long time," Marcus explained. "It's hard to let go of that." Ms. Walsh smiled gently. "That's what I thought. I've been working with the school counselor, Mrs. Patterson, and we have some ideas. Would you be open to Maya participating in our peer mentorship program? It might help her form connections while still feeling useful to others." They also discussed David's progress in kindergarten. His teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, reported that while David was bright and creative, he had separation anxiety and often asked to call Marcus during the school day. "It's normal for children who've experienced instability," Isabella had assured Marcus. "They need constant reassurance that their safe place still exists." The real test came on a Thursday in November. Marcus was in an important meeting with Japanese investors when Isabella called. "Marcus, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the school called. Maya got into a fight." Marcus excused himself from the meeting, something that would have been unthinkable months earlier, and drove to the school. He found Maya sitting in the principal's office, her usually neat hair disheveled, and a small cut on her lip. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling beside her chair. "Tommy Martinez said David was stupid because he cries sometimes," Maya said, her voice steady, but her hands shaking. "He said kids who cry don't have real dads to make them tough." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger, but he kept his voice calm. "So, you hit Tommy?" "I told him to take it back first. But he kept saying mean things about David, and about how we're just charity cases, because you felt sorry for us." Maya looked up at Marcus with tears in her eyes. Are we? Are we just charity cases?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He pulled Maya into his arms, right there in the principal's office, not caring who was watching. "Maya, listen to me," he said firmly. "You are not a charity case. You and David are my children. Not because I felt sorry for you, but because I love you. Both of you. More than I've ever loved anything in my life." "But we're not really yours," Maya whispered. "The papers aren't finished yet. What if you change your mind?" Marcus held her tighter. "Maya, what makes someone a real parent? Is it paperwork? Or is it showing up every day, making sure you're safe, helping with homework, worrying about you when you're sad, and being proud of you when you're brave?" "The second thing," Maya said quietly. "Then I'm your real dad. Papers or no papers. And David is my real son. And you are my real daughter. And real families stick up for each other, which is exactly what you did today." Principal Johnson, who had been listening from behind her desk, cleared her throat. "Mr. Wellington, while we can't condone violence, we understand Maya was defending her brother. Tommy's parents have been called, and we'll be addressing his behavior as well." Walking out of the school hand in hand with Maya, Marcus realized that being a parent meant more than providing for children. It meant being their advocate, their safe harbor, and sometimes their fiercest defender. "Dad," Maya said quietly as they reached the car. It was the first time she had called him that, and Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm sorry I got in trouble at school." "I'm not," Marcus said, surprising them both. "I'm proud of you for standing up for David. But next time, come get a teacher first, okay?" Maya nodded, then smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reminded Marcus why he had fallen in love with these children in the first place. The adoption paperwork was finally approved on a cold February morning, 8 months after that snowy night that had changed everything. Judge Patricia Morgan, a kindly woman in her 60s, smiled as she signed the final documents in her chambers. "Congratulations, Wellington family," she said warmly. "Marcus, Maya, and David, you are now legally and officially a family." Maya, wearing a new blue dress she had picked out specially for the occasion, reached for Marcus's hand. David, in his first real suit, was more interested in the judge's spinning chair, but he understood enough to know this was important. "Does this mean nobody can separate us ever?" Maya asked seriously. "That's exactly what it means," Judge Morgan confirmed. "Mr. Wellington is your father, you are his children, and nothing can change that." That evening, they celebrated at Maya's favorite restaurant, a small Italian place in their neighborhood where the owner, Mrs. Castellano, had taken a special interest in their family story. She brought out a cake with "Welcome Home," written in frosting and tears in her eyes. But with legal security came new challenges. As spring turned to summer, Marcus realized that loving children and parenting them were two very different skills. David, now 6, had developed what Isabella diplomatically called testing behaviors. He pushed boundaries constantly, refusing to clean his room, talking back, and having spectacular tantrums when he didn't get his way. "It's normal," Elena, their family therapist, explained during one of their regular sessions. "He feels safe enough now to express negative emotions. Before, his survival depended on being good. Now he knows you won't abandon him if he's difficult." Maya, meanwhile, struggled with what Elena called survivor's guilt. She had nightmares about her mother, wondering if she was betraying her memory by being happy in their new life. "I dreamed Mama was looking for us," she told Marcus one night after waking up crying. "What if she thinks we forgot about her?" Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, the glow from her nightlight casting soft shadows on the walls covered with her artwork and photos. "Maya, do you remember what your mama used to tell you about love? She said love isn't like pizza. It doesn't get smaller when you share it. It gets bigger." That's right. Loving me and David and our new family doesn't take away any of your love for your mama. And being happy now doesn't mean you loved her any less. The real crisis came in July. Marcus had planned a family vacation to Disney World, something he thought every child should experience. But the night before their flight, Maya had a panic attack. "I can't go," she sobbed, hyperventilating in Marcus's arms. "What if something happens? What if the plane crashes? What if you get hurt? Who will take care of David?" It took Marcus a moment to understand. For Maya, leaving their home base felt dangerous. Their apartment, their neighborhood, their routine, these were the foundations of security she had built so carefully. Asking her to trust that safety could exist elsewhere was asking more than she was ready to give. "Okay," Marcus said simply. "We won't go." "But you already bought the tickets," Maya protested. And David was so excited. "Then we'll do Disney World at home. Isabella, what do you think? Can we turn our living room into the Magic Kingdom?" What followed was the most elaborate staycation in Manhattan history. Marcus hired a face painter, rented Disney movies, and even arranged for costumed characters to visit their apartment. They built blanket forts, had ice cream for breakfast, and spent 3 days in pajamas. "This is better than the real Disney World," David announced on the third day, wearing mouse ears and chocolate on his face. "How do you know?" Maya asked, laughing as she helped him build a block castle. "Because our family is here," David said matter-of-factly. Watching his children play, Marcus realized something profound. Success, for him, had always been about reaching the next goal, achieving the next milestone. But family wasn't a destination, it was the journey itself. The daily choice to show up, to be present, to put their needs before his own ambitions. He had spent months trying to give Maya and David everything he thought they needed. But what they really needed was simple: consistency, patience, and the unshakable knowledge that they were loved unconditionally. "Dad." Maya called from where she was building with David. "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for staying home with us." "Thank you for teaching me that home isn't a place," Marcus replied. "It's wherever we're together." That night, as he tucked both children into their beds, Marcus reflected on how much they had all changed. Maya was learning to trust. David was learning to express his feelings safely. And Marcus was learning that the most important deal he had ever closed wasn't a business transaction. It was the moment two scared children in an alley had asked him to be their father. The call came on a Tuesday morning in September, just as Marcus was helping Maya with a particularly challenging math problem and David was building elaborate structures with his breakfast cereal. Isabella answered the phone, her expression growing serious as she listened. "Marcus," she said quietly, covering the receiver. "It's Maya and David's aunt, Denise." Marcus felt his stomach drop. They hadn't heard from Denise Johnson since those first few weeks, when Richard had attempted to contact her about the custody arrangements. She had been unreachable, her phone disconnected, her address no longer valid. "I'll take it in the office," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady for the children. "Mr. Wellington?" The voice on the other end was rough, tired. "This is Denise Johnson, Maya and David's aunt." "Ms. Johnson, how can I help you?" "I want to see my niece and nephew." Marcus closed his eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "Of course. They would love to see you. Where have you been? We tried to reach you months ago." "I've been getting my life together. I got clean, found a job, got a place. And now I want my kids back." The words hit Marcus like ice water. "Miss Johnson, I think there might be some misunderstanding. Maya and David have been legally adopted. They're my children now. Legal doesn't make you their blood, Mr. Wellington. I'm their family. Their real family. And I'm prepared to fight for them. After hanging up, Marcus sat in his home office, his hands shaking. Through the door, he could hear David laughing at something Isabella had said, and Maya practicing piano. The lessons she had begged for and taken to with typical intensity. Richard Morrison was at Marcus's apartment within an hour. Files and legal documents spread across the dining room table while the children played in the next room. Legally, Marcus, you're on solid ground, Richard said quietly. The adoption is final. Denise Johnson relinquished any claims when she failed to respond to court notices or provide alternative care. But she's their family, Marcus said, running his hands through his hair. Their blood family. What if she's really gotten her life together? What if she can provide them with something I can't? Marcus, listen to me. You've given these children stability, love, security, education, medical care, and a future. That's not something you just undo because a relative reappears. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Maya and David deserve to know their extended family, to understand their history and culture. But they also deserve protection from more trauma and instability. The meeting was arranged for the following Saturday at Elena's office, neutral ground where the children would feel safe. Denise Johnson was a thin woman in her late 30s with Maya's eyes and David's smile. She was clean, as she had claimed, and she cried when she saw the children. My babies, she whispered, kneeling down as David ran to her uncertainly, and Maya held back, wary. And Denise, David said, we thought you were gone. I was sick for a while, baby boy, but I'm better now. I'm so much better. Maya remained by Marcus's side, her hand in his. Where were you when we were cold? She asked quietly. Where were you when David was hungry? The question hung in the air like smoke. Denise's eyes filled with tears, but she met Maya's gaze directly. I was sick, Maya Bird. Sick in a way that made me no good to anybody, especially not to you and David. I wanted to take care of you, but I couldn't even take care of myself. Maya studied her aunt's face with that unsettling intensity she brought to everything important. Are you better now? Really better? I'm trying to be. Every day, I'm trying to be. Elena facilitated the conversation with gentle skill, helping everyone navigate the complex emotions in the room. David, who remembered Aunt Denise as the fun adult who used to let him stay up late and eat ice cream for dinner, was eager to reconnect. Maya, who remembered Aunt Denise as the adult who had disappeared when they needed her most, was cautious. I don't want to take them away from you, Denise said to Marcus as the session concluded. I can see they're happy. I can see they're loved. I want to be part of their lives again. I want them to know they have family besides you. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Denise, they do have family besides me. They have you if you want to be in their lives in a healthy way. But I need to know that you understand. I'm their father now. This is their home. I won't let them be hurt again. I understand, Denise said quietly. And I'm grateful. More grateful than you'll ever know. They agreed to supervise visits, starting with short afternoons and building slowly. Denise would need to maintain her sobriety, keep steady employment, and prove that she could be a consistent, positive presence in their lives. The first few visits were awkward, stilted affairs. Denise tried too hard, bringing elaborate gifts and planning activities that felt forced. But gradually, as Elena helped them all navigate the new dynamic, something more natural emerged. Denise began teaching Maya how to braid hair the way their mother had done it, with small flowers woven through the plaits. She showed David card tricks and told him stories about his mother as a little girl. Most importantly, she supported Marcus's rules and routines instead of undermining them. You know, she said to Marcus one evening after a particularly good visit, Sarah would have loved you. She always said she wanted someone who would see how special her babies were. They are special, Marcus agreed. And they're lucky to have an aunt who fought to get healthy, so she could be part of their lives. 3 months later, as they celebrated David's 7th birthday with a small party in their apartment, Marcus watched Maya help Denise frost the homemade cake, while David directed Isabella in the hanging of streamers. It wasn't the family he had imagined, but it was theirs, complicated, imperfect, and absolutely perfect. "Dad," Maya said, appearing at his elbow, with frosting on her fingers. "Thank you for letting Aunt Denise come back. Thank you for being brave enough to give her another chance," Marcus replied. "That's what families do. We forgive, we grow, and we figure it out together." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Mama used to say that families aren't just the people you're born with. They're the people who choose to love you and stay with you." "Your mama was a very wise woman," Marcus said, pulling his daughter close. "And she raised a very wise daughter." As the party continued around them, Marcus reflected on how much his understanding of family had evolved. It wasn't about blood or legal documents or perfect circumstances. It was about choosing, every day, to show up for the people you loved, and trusting them to show up for you in return. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the same alley where he had first found Maya and David, but everything was different. The narrow passage between buildings had been transformed into a small memorial garden, complete with benches, flowering plants, and a plaque that read, "In honor of all the children waiting for someone to see them." It was Maya's idea, this memorial garden. Now 10 years old and in 5th grade, she had presented the proposal to Marcus with architectural drawings, a budget, and a detailed explanation of why this particular spot mattered. "This is where our real life started," she had explained. "Not when Mama died, and not when we were scared and cold, but when someone stopped and saw us and decided we mattered." The garden dedication ceremony was small but meaningful. Elena was there, along with Isabella, who had become so much more than a nanny. She was family. Denise came with her new boyfriend, a gentle man named Robert who had embraced his role as honorary uncle with enthusiasm. Judge Morgan attended, along with several social workers and volunteers from the children's shelter Marcus had begun supporting. But the most important guests were the other families, 3 couples and 1 single mother who had been inspired by Maya and David's story to open their own homes to children in need. "When I first met Marcus, Maya, and David," Elena said, addressing the small crowd, "I saw a man who thought love was something you earned through achievement, and 2 children who thought love was something that could be taken away without warning. What I see today is a family who has learned that love is simply something you choose, every day, no matter what." David, now 8 and missing 2 front teeth, stepped forward with the ceremonial scissors to cut the ribbon. He had grown into a confident, chatty boy who made friends easily and still crawled into Maya's bed during thunderstorms. "I want to say something," he announced, causing the adults to smile. David always wanted to say something. "This garden is nice and everything," he began, "but the real important thing is that me and Maya aren't scared anymore. We know we have a home and a dad who won't leave us, and an Aunt Denise who comes to our soccer games, and Isabella who makes the best grilled cheese in the world." He paused, thinking. "And we have each other. Maya's still my big sister who takes care of me, but now she gets to be a kid too sometimes. And that's pretty good." Maya rolled her eyes at her little brother's speech, but Marcus could see she was fighting back tears. At 10, she was still serious and observant, but she had learned to trust joy. She had friends now, participated in the school play, and had recently declared her intention to become either a lawyer like Richard or a family therapist like Elena, so I can help other kids who need families. As the ceremony concluded and people began to disperse, Denise approached Marcus. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to resent you. This rich man who swooped in and saved the day when I couldn't. But watching them today, seeing how happy and secure they are, I understand now that love isn't about who deserves credit. It's about what's best for the children." "They needed you too," Marcus replied. "They needed to know their history, their culture, their mother's family. Being their father doesn't mean I have to be everything to them." That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, their nightly ritual that had become sacred, David was recounting the day's events with his usual dramatic flair when Maya suddenly became quiet. "What is it, sweetheart?" Marcus asked. "I was just thinking about that night," she said. "When we asked you to adopt us. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had just walked away? Marcus considered the question seriously. It was something he had wondered about, especially in the early days when everything felt overwhelming. Sometimes, he admitted. But then I remember that walking away wasn't really an option. Not because I'm such a good person, but because you two made it impossible. You looked at me and saw something I didn't even know was there, the capacity to be a father. You were always a father, Maya said matter-of-factly. You just needed some kids to father. David giggled. That doesn't make sense, Maya. It makes perfect sense, Marcus said, reaching across to ruffle David's hair. Just like you were always my children. I just needed to find you. Later that night, as Marcus made his final rounds, checking that homework was completed, teeth were brushed, and nightlights were on, he found Maya at her bedroom window, looking out at the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts?" he said, using the phrase that had become their special way of checking in with each other. "I was thinking about Mama," Maya said. "Not sad thinking. Good thinking. I think she would be proud of us." "What makes you think that?" Maya smiled, and in that moment, Marcus could see the woman she would become. Strong, compassionate, wise beyond her years. "Because we kept our promise to her. We stayed together, we took care of each other, and we learned how to be happy again. And we found someone who loves us the way she did, like we're the most important thing in the world." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "You are the most important thing in the world. You and David. You always will be." "I know," Maya said simply. "That's what makes us so lucky." As Marcus turned off the lights and headed to his own room, he reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. 3 years ago, he had been a successful but lonely man who thought he had everything he needed. 2 frightened children in an alley had taught him the difference between having everything and having what mattered. They had all kept their promises. Maya and David had learned to trust again. Denise had fought for her sobriety and earned her place in their extended family. Isabella had helped them build routines and traditions that felt like home. And Marcus had discovered that the most important acquisition of his life wasn't a company or a deal. It was the privilege of being called Dad by 2 extraordinary children who had chosen to love him. Outside, snow began to fall gently on the memorial garden, covering the flowers in a soft white blanket. But inside their warm apartment, 3 people who had found each other in the darkest of times slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that families aren't just born. Sometimes they're built, one choice, one day, one act of love at a time. In the morning, there would be breakfast to make, homework to check, and the beautiful, ordinary chaos of family life to navigate. But tonight, Marcus Wellington, father, guardian, and the luckiest man in New York City, closed his eyes and smiled, grateful beyond words for the moment 2 small voices in an alley had asked him to change his life forever. And he had said yes.